The fluorescent lights flickered weakly in the silent underground parking garage of Chicago Memorial Hospital. It was well past 1 a.m. when Olivia Carter hurried past the rows of concrete pillars after a shift that had stretched close to 40 hours without a real break. Her legs felt as if they were filled with lead. The dark hollows beneath her eyes sank deep from unending sleep deprivation. The worn-down click of her heels echoed through the empty space. Mingling with the faint drip of water from somewhere in the ceiling, the familiar soundtrack of countless late nights she had survived over 4 years on the night shift. She dug through her old, faded handbag for her keys, wanting only to get back to her tiny apartment on the south side, stand under water hot enough to burn, and fall into oblivious sleep before the next shift began. That was when a low moan made her stop dead in her tracks. Olivia's heart lurched and hammered against her ribs. She turned, her dark hazel eyes sweeping across the rows of cars resting in stillness. Was someone hurt? The sound came again, a broken, muffled groan soaked in pain, bouncing off the cold concrete walls of Chicago at night. In the murky half-light, she saw a shape slumped by the wheel of a sleek black Maserati, a few rows away. Cautious instinct rooted her to the spot. The South Side was not safe. Chicago was not safe. Especially not for a woman alone at 1 a.m. She had lived in this neighborhood long enough to know the rule that kept you breathing. Don't get involved in anything that is not your business. But the moan rose again, more desperate this time, like the sound of someone slipping under for the last time, and the instincts of an emergency room nurse pushed past her fear. Her mother had died because there was no one there to help. Olivia could not turn her back. She moved toward the figure. A man in a charcoal 3-piece suit lay half-sitting, half-folded against the car's tire. Under the harsh garage lighting, his face came into focus, sharp and angular as if carved from stone, a faint scar tracing along his left jawline. He was beautiful in a way that bordered on terrifying, even now when his skin had turned an awful chalky white and glistened with cold sweat. But Olivia's gaze didn't linger on his face. It dropped to his torso, to the white dress shirt where a dark stain was spreading outward like a blooming shadow. Blood. A lot of blood. Without thinking twice, she dropped to her knees beside him, her kneecaps landing in the red pool that was slowly widening over the concrete floor. "Sir, can you hear me?" Her voice came out quick and tight as she set a hand on his shoulder. The expensive fabric of his suit was soaked through under her fingers near the wound. He exhaled sharply, his eyelids trembling. Looking closer, Olivia saw the neat, vicious hole at his left side, just beneath the rib cage. A gunshot wound. The bullet had gone straight through. By some miracle, it had missed the major organs by a fraction of an inch, but it had nicked an artery. The bright red blood was pumping out in rhythm with his failing heart. He wouldn't die from organ failure. He would die from simply being drained dry. She had seen more wounds like this than she could count in the emergency room, victims of gang violence and bloody vendettas in the city Chicago was infamous for. But never alone, never in the middle of the night, in an empty underground parking lot with no backup, no one else in sight. This was not an accident. This was an execution. Olivia's hands began to move on their own, guided by 5 years of experience that drove her body before her conscious mind could catch up. She tore open the front of his suit jacket and shoved it aside to get to the wound. Blood was pouring in steady, hot streams from the ragged hole, thick and dark against her skin. He would die if he didn't get treatment in the next 10 minutes. With one hand, she yanked a clean cloth from her bag and pressed it hard against the wound to stem the flow. With the other, she fumbled for her phone. Just as her screen lit up, the man's eyes snapped open. Olivia flinched. Not because it startled her, but because of what she saw in those eyes. They were steel gray, cold as winter ice, and razor sharp. The eyes of a man who had seen death too many times to be afraid of it anymore. They locked onto her with such fierce intensity that she forgot how to breathe. His hand shot out, faster than any man that badly wounded should have been able to move, and clamped around her wrist. Long fingers, rough and calloused, tightened like a vice, smearing his blood across her skin. "No." His voice came out ragged, the word dragged over gravel, yet threaded with an authority that was impossible to ignore. Each syllable sounded like it cost him. "Don't call the police." Olivia hesitated, the phone hovering in her hand. "But you need emergency care." "No hospital." He grimaced and shook his head, a weak, stubborn motion. Every word seemed to tear at him from the inside. "They will finish me." The hand around her wrist trembled from blood loss, but the strength in his grip remained unnervingly steady. Those steel gray eyes, clouded now with pain, still burned with something that looked dangerously close to pleading. Whoever he feared, they were clearly worse than the thought of bleeding out in the dark. Who was he? Olivia didn't know. But she knew this much. He was dying, right there in front of her. And she had already watched too many people die. Her mother had died because there was no money for treatment. Her father had died right in front of her. Blood and brain matter splattered across the wall. She could not stand by and watch one more person slip away. "All right," Olivia whispered past the tightness in her throat, making the choice in a single heartbeat. "No police. For now." She slid the phone back into her bag and poured all her strength into the hand pressing on his wound. "But you have to stay with me. Do you hear? Look at me. Don't close your eyes." He looked at her. For an instant, something unreadable flickered in those steel-gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps, as if he was not used to people agreeing with him without demanding anything in return. His mouth moved, trying to form words, but no sound came. Then his gaze began to blur, the lids drooping heavier and heavier. "Hey, stay awake." Olivia slapped his cheek lightly. "Don't you dare." The roar of engines shattered the heavy silence. Olivia's head snapped up, her heart clenching. 2 black sport utility vehicles, Cadillac Escalades with tinted windows, hurtled down the ramp into the garage and screeched to a stop nearby. Their headlights knifed through the darkness, sweeping over her like a spotlight on a stage. For one brief moment she thought help had arrived. Then the doors flew open. Men spilled out, dressed in black suits, guns already drawn and gleaming, moving with the practiced precision of special forces. "Spread out," one of them shouted, his voice deep and commanding. The order crashed against the concrete like thunder. "Check the area. Make sure it is secure." The blood in Olivia's veins seemed to freeze. These were not police officers. They were not medics. The survival instinct that had carried her through 14 years with a violent alcoholic father shoved her backwards. She lifted her hands from the man's body and scrambled away, then bolted for the shadow behind the nearest concrete pillar. Her heart pounded, a panicked drumbeat in her chest as she held her breath. Who were they? Had they come to save him or to finish what someone else had started? From her hiding place, she saw a tall man drop to one knee beside the wounded stranger. His skin was dark, his head clean-shaven, a scar drawing a hard line along his temple. His expression shifted as he took in the scene. "Boss." His voice broke as he cried out. "Boss, can you hear me? Boss." Olivia went perfectly still. The shaved-headed man examined the wound, then spotted the blood-soaked cloth pressed against the injured man's side. His gaze swept the garage, sharp and searching like a hawk's. "Someone has been here," he said loudly, his tone edged with suspicion. Someone tried to stop the bleeding. Olivia drew herself in tighter, willing her body to disappear into the shadow of the pillar. "Don't find me. Please don't find me." "We are out of time," another man called. "The cops will be here any minute. Get him in the car, now." They moved with blinding speed. 2 of them lifted their boss with the careful efficiency of men carrying a king. The car door slammed. Engines growled. Tires screamed against concrete. And then, in the space of a breath, they were gone, swallowed by the Chicago night as quickly as they had appeared. Silence crashed back down, heavy and suffocating. Olivia didn't know how long she had been holding her breath. Slowly she stepped out from behind the pillar, her legs trembling as if they might give way beneath her. Her handkerchief lay abandoned on the oil-stained concrete, drenched in a stranger's blood. Her white scrub top, the uniform she had worn through 4 long years, was now mottled with dark red splashes. She looked down at her hands. They shook uncontrollably, stained with blood all the way to her wrists. What had just happened? She had stumbled upon a dying man, kept him alive with nothing but her bare hands, then watched a dangerous private army swoop in and take him away, offering no explanation, not even a word of thanks. They had called him boss. They moved like soldiers. They carried guns as naturally as if they were part of their bodies. Who was he? Olivia staggered toward her old Honda Civic, the car she had bought with 3 years of extra shifts and overtime. She unlocked it and dropped into the driver's seat but didn't start the engine. Her hands still would not stop shaking. The image of the stranger's face refused to leave her mind. The steel gray eyes, at once cold and yet imploring, the way his fingers had clamped around her wrist as if she were the only lifeline in a vast black sea. They will finish me. What was he so afraid of that he would rather die in a parking garage than be taken to a hospital? A shiver ran down Olivia's spine. She had lived in Chicago long enough to know the answer. She had seen plenty of casualties from the city's gang wars come through the emergency room, young men with tattoos and bullet holes in their chests, their eyes already empty, resigned to whatever awaited them. But the man from tonight was not like them. He was not some street-level gang member. He was something larger, something far more dangerous. She didn't know whether she had just made a terrible mistake or a choice that would change her life forever. But one thing was certain. A single act of compassion tonight had pulled her into something far beyond the world she knew. Olivia Carter had saved a stranger's life, and she had no idea that he was Dominic Valenti, the most notorious Mafia kingpin in Chicago, the man who ruled the underworld with blood and iron, the one even the police were afraid to touch, the man who would never let her go. If you are listening to this and feel that the story touches something quiet and unspoken inside you, take a moment to subscribe to our channel, to like and share this video so we can continue bringing heartfelt stories every single day. And if it is not too much to ask, tell me where you are watching from, and leave a comment below so we know which corner of the world this story has reached, because we treasure every word you share with us. Olivia reached her tiny studio apartment on the south side close to 3 in the morning. She didn't remember how she had driven there, how many intersections she had crossed, how many red lights had changed from one color to another above her. Her body had moved like a machine while her mind stayed trapped in that dark parking garage. She locked the door, flipped on the light, and stood frozen in the middle of her cramped room, a space barely 15 square meters. The dim yellow glow from the old bulb fell across her hands, and that was when she saw it. Blood. Still there, dark red, dried and stiff in the lines of her palms, under her nails, spattered along her wrists. The blood of a stranger. The blood of a man whose name she didn't know. She lunged for the bathroom, turned the hot water tap as far as it would go, and scrubbed her hands beneath the near scalding stream. Soap. More soap. She rubbed harder, then harder still, until the skin reddened and burned, until the water spiraling down the drain ran clear with no hint of pink. But when she lifted her head and met her reflection in the mirror, she still saw it. The blood, as if it had soaked into her skin, into her bones, into the quiet, hidden places of her soul. And then the memories rose up, crashing over her like a tidal wave. She was 19, the old apartment on the south side, even more run down than the one she lived in now. Her father stood in the middle of the living room, eyes bloodshot from alcohol, a pistol clenched in his hand. Ethan, 13 years old, was hiding in the bedroom where she had told him to stay, and Olivia stood there in front of her father, begging, reasoning, trying anything, everything, to stop the ending she already saw coming. "You ruined my life." The gunshot exploded. Blood and brain matter sprayed across the wall, across her face, across the white shirt she was wearing. Olivia jerked back to the present, gripping the sides of the sink, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. The faint scar on her left wrist flared with pain, as if it too remembered. It remembered that night. It remembered the razor blade in the bathroom. It remembered Ethan's voice calling Liv from outside the door, the sound that had dragged her back from the edge. She stared into the mirror. The face of a woman of 27 looked back at her, but the eyes were much older than that, pale, shadowed by bruised half-moons beneath, lips cracked, hair tangled. And in the depths of those hazel eyes a single question turned and turned without rest. Is he still alive? Did I do the right thing? She didn't know. She could not know. Olivia stepped into the hot shower, changed into clean clothes, then lay down on her narrow, creaking single bed. She closed her eyes and ordered herself to sleep, but every time she drifted toward it, she saw those eyes again, steel gray, cold as ice, sharp as a blade. They stared at her through the dark, through her dreams, through the thin walls of the cheap apartment. A gunshot cracked the air. Engines roared. Someone shouted "boss" with panic in their voice. She woke with a start when her phone buzzed. Daylight was filtering through the worn curtain. The clock read 10 in the morning. She had slept not even 4 hours. On the screen she saw Ethan's name beside a picture of a young man grinning at the camera, her younger brother, the boy she had sacrificed everything to raise. "Liv, you okay? I called you a few times last night and you didn't pick up." Ethan's voice brimmed with the restless energy of a 21-year-old college student tasting freedom. Olivia swallowed and forced her voice to sound normal. "I am fine. Just a long shift. How are you? How are classes?" She listened as Ethan talked about exams, friends, a difficult professor. She answered with the familiar short phrases, the ones she always used. No, she didn't tell him about the previous night. She didn't mention the bleeding man. She didn't mention the steel-gray eyes that haunted her. Ethan didn't need to know. Ethan must not know. "Take care of yourself, okay? Don't work too hard," she promised, then ended the call. That afternoon, Olivia went to work as usual. She put on a fresh white scrub top, clipped on her badge, and walked into the emergency department of Chicago Memorial with her professional smile in place. She wrapped bandages, checked blood pressure, filled out charts. No one knew what she had done the night before. No one asked why the shadows beneath her eyes were deeper than usual. And when her shift was finally over and she stepped out of the hospital into the thin yellow light of the street lamps, Olivia told herself that it was all over. Just one strange night, just a coincidence. His people had taken him away. She would never see him again. She was wrong. 3 days passed. 3 days in which Olivia tried to live as if that night had never happened. 3 days in which she went to work, went home, slept, and woke from nightmares filled with steel-gray eyes. But nothing happened. No police, no questions, no sign of the mysterious man. Olivia began to believe that she might actually be free, that maybe it really had been one wild night she could bury with all the other painful memories. She was wrong. On the third night, Olivia finished her shift at 11. Chicago Memorial still glowed behind her as she walked out to the staff parking lot. Not the underground garage this time, but the open-air lot outside. The Chicago night wind cut sharp and cold, carrying the faint smell of Lake Michigan from the east. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and hurried toward her old Honda Civic parked in the far corner. Then she saw it. A black Mercedes Maybach sat blocking the path, headlights off, engine quiet, like some sleek animal crouched in the dark waiting to spring. Olivia slowed, her heartbeat picking up speed. Maybe it was only a coincidence. Maybe the driver had just parked in the wrong place. She tried to walk around it, but the car door swung open. A man stepped out, tall, head-shaved, smooth, a scar tracing down his left temple, and the same predator-sharp eyes she had seen in the garage 3 nights earlier. The eyes of the man who had dropped to his knees beside the wounded stranger and called him boss, in a voice stricken with fear. Olivia stopped where she was, every survival instinct she owned screaming inside her head. Run, now. But her legs felt nailed to the asphalt. The man approached, stopping a few paces away. He wore a black suit, his posture rigid like a soldier's, but his voice when he spoke was unexpectedly polite. "Miss Carter, Olivia Carter." Not a question, a statement. "Who are you?" Olivia asked. Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. "What do you want?" "My name is Marcus Webb. I work for Mr. Dominic Valenti." He paused, studying her reaction. "Mr. Valenti would like to see you. This is not an invitation." Olivia took a step back. "I don't know any Mr. Valenti. You have the wrong person." Marcus didn't flinch. 3 nights ago, the parking garage. "You kept a man from bleeding out. That man is my boss." For a heartbeat, Olivia's heart simply stopped. They knew. They knew exactly who she was. "I only did what any nurse would have done," she managed, forcing herself to keep her tone even. "I don't want any trouble. Please let me go." She turned to leave, but Marcus's voice reached her from behind, soft and cool as a blade at her throat. "Olivia Carter, 27 years old. Emergency room nurse at Chicago Memorial. Night shift. Address, apartment 42, Greenwood Building, South Side. Debt, $47,000 in student loans and private interest. Younger brother, Ethan Carter, 21, third-year student at the University of Illinois at Chicago, currently living in Commons West Dormitory, room 317. Olivia froze, every drop of blood in her body turning to ice. Marcus came to stand beside her, lowering his voice. "We are not threatening you, Miss Carter. We simply want you to understand that my boss wishes to meet the woman who saved his life. And when Dominic Valenti wants something, refusal is not an option." Olivia swallowed hard. She thought of Ethan, of his easy smile during their call 2 mornings ago, of the years she had given up so that he could have a normal life. If she fought them, if she screamed for help, what would they do to him? She could not take that risk. She could not let Ethan lose his sister the way she had lost their mother. "I will go," she whispered. Marcus nodded, opened the rear door. Olivia climbed inside, and before she could fully process what was happening, a piece of soft black cloth settled over her eyes. "My apologies for the inconvenience." Marcus's voice floated from somewhere in the front. "Security protocol." The car rolled forward. Olivia sat in the darkness, her heart beating wildly, trying to memorize every turn, every stop, each change in speed. But after a while she lost all sense of direction. The city fell away into a blur of movement and time. She knew only one thing. She was being taken to the man whose life she had saved. The Mafia boss, the ruler of Chicago's underworld. 20 minutes or 40, she could not tell. The car finally slowed and stopped. Doors opened. Someone helped her out, and the cloth was lifted from her eyes. Olivia blinked in the soft golden light. In front of her rose a mansion that looked like it belonged in films she had never dared to dream of. White marble stone, tall Greek columns, high windows, gardens trimmed with flawless precision, and in the distance, the dark surface of Lake Michigan shimmered beneath the moonlight like an enormous mirror. She was standing at the mouth of the wolf's den. Olivia stepped through massive oak doors into a world that didn't seem real. The Valenti estate was not only luxurious, it was overwhelming. The white marble floor shone like ice beneath her feet, reflecting the glow from chandeliers of crystal suspended from a ceiling far above. Oil paintings in gilded frames lined the hallway, portraits of long-dead aristocrats gazing down at her with cold, judging eyes. A sweeping marble staircase curled upward to the next floor, like the spine of some great stone beast. Everything was expensive. Everything was flawless. Yet the air inside the house felt heavy as a mausoleum, cold, still. And at every corner, every turn in the corridor, a man in a black suit stood watch, eyes hard and alert, tracking her every step. Marcus led her down a hallway that seemed to stretch on forever, his leather shoes tapping a steady rhythm against the marble floor. Olivia tried to memorize each turn, each doorway, tried to find some mental map to an exit, but the house felt like a maze built for one purpose only, to make sure no one ever truly found their way out. At last they stopped before a set of double doors made of dark walnut. Marcus knocked twice, waited, then pushed them open. "Miss Carter has arrived, sir." The study was wide and imposing, its walls paneled in wood, its bookshelves rising from floor to ceiling, crammed with leather-bound volumes. A massive mahogany desk sat before a wall of glass that looked out over Lake Michigan, and seated behind that desk, in a high-backed leather chair that might as well have been a throne, was the man she had saved, Dominic Valenti. It was the first time Olivia had seen him in full light, and she had to admit the shadowy image from the parking garage had not done him justice. He was handsome, but in a way that felt dangerous, like a blade wrapped in velvet. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, with that faint scar running down his left cheek now clearly visible beneath the warm golden glow of the lamps. His dark hair, slightly wavy, was brushed back from his forehead, revealing a high brow and thick brows that framed those eyes. It was those eyes that held her, that would not let her look away. Steel gray, cold as a Chicago winter, as sharp as the bullets that had torn into his body 3 nights ago. He wore a white shirt with the top few buttons undone, the edge of a white bandage peeking from beneath the fabric, wrapped tight around his torso. His skin was still paler than it should have been, his lips a touch dry, but the way he sat radiated an unquestionable authority. The years on his face were only part of the story. His eyes looked far older, the eyes of a man who had held power over life and death, who had seen death, caused death, so many times that it no longer haunted him. "Leave her here. Get out." Dominic's voice was low and deep, not loud, yet it carried a weight that made Marcus bow his head at once and withdraw, closing the door behind him. Olivia was left standing alone in the center of the room, facing the most feared Mafia boss in Chicago, feeling very much like a rabbit cornered by a wolf. "Sit." Not a request, a command. Olivia didn't sit. "I want to know why I am here." Something flickered in those steel-gray eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps amusement. Dominic tilted his head slightly, studying her as though she were some unfamiliar creature that had wandered into his world. "You saved my life," he said slowly, each word clear and measured. "I need to know why." "Because I am a nurse. That is what I do. No one does anything for free in my world, Miss Carter. Everything has a price. Kindness, loyalty, even silence. So what do you want? Money? How much?" Olivia felt anger surge up in her chest, hot enough to burn through the fear. "My world is not your world. I don't save people for money. I save them because it is the right thing to do." Dominic was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. Then he rose, slowly, bracing one hand on the desk as if the wound still tugged at him from within. He moved around the desk and came toward her, each step steady and deliberate, each one carrying its own quiet threat. "Do you know who I am? I am guessing you are not some ordinary businessman." A thin smile brushed Dominic's mouth, cold and humorless, never touching his eyes. "My name is Dominic Valenti. I run everything that happens in the shadows of this city, and 3 nights ago, my enemies tried to kill me." He stopped less than a pace away, his height and presence pressing down on her like a weight. "They failed because of you, but they are still out there, and anyone who saw me that night could be in danger." Olivia's heartbeat sped up. "What does that mean?" "It means you have been dragged into this war, whether you want it or not. My enemies will find you. They will question you. They will kill you." Dominic tilted his head, his voice dropping softer, more terrible. "Unless you are here. Under my protection. I don't need your protection. You don't have a choice. You will stay here until I have dealt with the threat. Olivia stepped back, her voice trembling with fury. You can't keep me here. I have a job. I have a younger brother to take care of. You can't just... I can. Dominic cut across her words without raising his voice, his tone turning as cold as ice, without a hint of doubt. And I will. Your brother will be watched and protected from a distance. Your work will be handled, but you will not leave this house until I allow it. He turned his back to her and walked to his chair, settling in behind the desk again as if the conversation were over. Marcus will show you to your room. Get some rest. You will be here for a while. Olivia stood there with her hands clenched into fists so tight her nails bit into her palms. She wanted to scream, to fight, to run for the door and bolt down the hall and out into the night, but she knew it would be useless. She had seen the men with guns at every corner of the house. She had heard them recite every detail of her life, of Ethan's life. She had stepped into the cage of the most dangerous beast in Chicago, and the door had slammed shut behind her. Marcus led Olivia up to the second floor by way of the marble spiral staircase, along another long corridor lined with oil paintings and gilded wall sconces, before stopping at a solid oak door. He opened it and gestured for her to enter, and Olivia found herself standing in a room she had only ever seen in glossy magazines scattered across hospital waiting rooms. A king-size bed, with an intricately carved wooden frame, cream-colored silk sheets, a white down comforter puffed up like a cloud, a floor-to-ceiling window that opened onto a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, the dark waters shimmering under the moon, a private bathroom where the floor and walls were all white marble veined with gray, an oval tub large enough for two, and a glass-walled shower with gleaming gold fixtures. Everything was luxurious, everything was perfect, and Olivia had never felt more out of place in her life. She thought of her 15-square-meter studio on the south side, the narrow single bed that groaned every time she rolled over, the cracked walls with streaks of damp mold in the corner, the rusty faucet that only trickled, the old refrigerator that hummed and rattled through the night, the window looking out on a dark alley piled with trash and smelling of urine. That was all she could afford on her night nurse salary after paying her debts and sending money to Ethan. And now she stood in this room, where the bedside lamp alone probably cost more than her entire monthly paycheck. The door clicked shut behind her. The sharp, small sound of a lock turning followed. Olivia spun around and rushed to the door, grabbing the handle and twisting with all her strength. Nothing. She pounded on the wood, raised her voice, called out, but no one answered. She ran to the window, searched for the latch, and tried to open it. Locked tight, when she looked down, she saw the gardens below. Neat rows of rose bushes and two men in black suits patrolling the grounds. There was no way out. Her phone. She needed to call Ethan, to tell him she was all right, or at the very least still alive. Olivia dug through her coat pockets, then her jeans, but her fingers met only empty fabric. They had taken her phone at some point, probably in the car, while her eyes had been covered and her mind too panicked to notice. She dropped onto the edge of the bed, bowed her head, and covered her face with her hands. She was a prisoner, wrapped in silk, surrounded by marble and glass, but still a prisoner. A soft knock sounded. The lock turned again. Marcus stepped in, carrying a silver tray. He set it on the small table near the window, and the smell of hot food drifted toward her, reminding her with a sharp pang that she had not eaten all day. "You should try to eat something," Marcus said, his tone still courteous, as if she were a guest rather than someone they had locked in. Olivia didn't touch the tray. Who is he really? Dominic Valenti. Marcus paused at the doorway and looked back at her. Something flickered in his sharp eyes, maybe warning, maybe pity. He is a man you were never meant to know, Miss Carter. But it is too late for that now. I want to see him. I want to negotiate. In the morning, he is resting. Marcus opened the door wider, ready to leave. The wound you kept from killing him is not fully healed. He needs time. The door closed. The lock clicked again. Olivia stared at the tray, then turned to the window where Lake Michigan stretched out into the night like a dark, endless sheet of glass. Her hunger faded. All she felt was exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness, and a loneliness that reached all the way down to the core of her. She thought of Ethan, wondering if he was worried yet, if he had tried and failed to reach her. She thought of the hospital, of patients who would be wheeled into the emergency room and find some other nurse at their side. She thought of her cramped little apartment, the one she had complained about so many times, and now missed with an ache that felt like homesickness. She lay down on the bed without changing clothes, without showering, just stretched out on her back and stared at the high ceiling with its elaborate painted patterns. The silk beneath her was cool and smoother than anything she had ever felt, yet there was no comfort in it. It felt as if she were sinking, being swallowed whole by this luxury, by this world, by the man with the steel-gray eyes and absolute power. Would she ever be allowed to go home? Olivia didn't know the answer, but she knew one thing: she would not give up. She had survived a hellish childhood with a violent father. She had survived the night he put a gun to his own head in front of her. She had survived 10 years of poverty and crushing debt. She would survive this too, somehow. The next morning, Marcus knocked on Olivia's door at 7 o'clock. She had been awake for a long time already, unable to sleep more than a few hours at a stretch, her rest broken by jagged dreams of steel-gray eyes and gunfire. He led her down the hallway, but not to the study as he had the night before. This time they stopped before a larger set of double doors, and when Marcus opened them, Olivia found herself stepping into Dominic Valenti's master bedroom. The room was twice the size of the one she had been given, with a high ceiling and a wide wall of glass that opened onto a private balcony. But Olivia barely registered the luxury. Her gaze locked on the man lying in the bed, and the nurse inside her sounded a clear, urgent alarm. Dominic looked much worse than he had the previous night. His skin was no longer pale, it had taken on a gray cast. Sweat beaded on his forehead even though the room was kept cool. His lips were dry and cracked, his breathing shallow and rapid. The white bandages wrapped around his torso were smeared now with a dark red stain, fresh blood seeping through several layers of gauze. She had seen these signs too many times in the emergency room: infection, maybe even the beginnings of sepsis if no one intervened. Olivia turned to Marcus, her voice suddenly edged with crisp, professional steel. "When was that dressing last changed? Who has been taking care of his wound?" Marcus hesitated, glancing toward his half-conscious boss sprawled on the bed. "Our private doctor, Dr. Chen, is stuck in New York. Security complications after the attack. He can't get back yet. We have people changing the bandages, but no one here actually knows how to manage an infected gunshot wound." Olivia cut in, stepping closer to the bed. She looked down at Dominic, and those steel-gray eyes opened, clouded by fever yet still sharp, still recognizing her. "He needs intravenous antibiotics. He needs proper wound care. He needs someone who knows what they are doing." "Can you do it?" Marcus asked, his voice dropping. Olivia looked at the man in the bed, the man who was holding her captive, the man who had dragged her into this insane world, and she saw an opening. "I can," she turned to Marcus. "But I have a condition. I will take care of his wound. I will make sure he does not die from infection. In exchange, I want to call my brother. I need to know he is safe." Marcus looked toward Dominic, waiting for a decision. The Mafia boss gave a slight nod, his voice roughened by fever. "Let her call, but monitor every call, and she does not tell anyone where she is." Olivia nodded. That was a price she could accept. Marcus brought in a medical kit stocked with supplies, and Olivia went to work. She washed her hands, pulled on gloves, and carefully peeled away the old bandage. The wound beneath made her frown. The bullet hole had been stitched, but the edges were inflamed and swollen, an angry red with the beginnings of pus. She cleaned the area with antiseptic, gentle yet meticulous, then applied antibiotic ointment and wrapped it again with fresh, sterile gauze. All the while her gloved hands brushed his skin, feeling the unnatural heat coming off his body, the tight clench of hard muscle under her fingers whenever she passed too close to the sensitive flesh around the wound. She tried not to think about any of that, tried to stay focused on the task, but she knew he was watching her. Those steel-gray eyes never left her face. "Your hands don't shake." Dominic's voice came low and rough. "I am an emergency room nurse. I don't get to let my hands shake. You have seen a lot of wounds like this. I have seen worse than this, many times. At the hospital." Olivia paused for half a beat, then went on with the bandage. "At home." She didn't elaborate. She didn't speak about the alcoholic brute of a father. She didn't speak about all the nights she had wrapped bandages around her mother's injuries, around her own. She didn't speak about that last night when her father's blood and brain matter had painted the wall. Dominic didn't press her, but Olivia could feel his gaze shift, something fleeting passing through it, perhaps curiosity, perhaps something deeper that she refused to name. She finished the dressing, stripped off her gloves, and straightened. "I need to check the wound twice a day. He needs antibiotics, plenty of fluids, and rest. If the fever does not come down within 24 hours, we are going to have a serious problem." Marcus nodded, taking in every word. "And my call?" Olivia asked. Dominic closed his eyes, drained but still in command. He nodded once. Let her call. Now. The terms were set. She would tend his injuries. He would keep her brother safe. Neither of them trusted the other, but both of them needed what the other had. And as Olivia took the phone, Marcus handed her and heard Ethan's cheerful, "Hey, Liv," spill through the line. She understood that she had just made a bargain with the devil, but for her brother's safety, she was willing to stake her soul. 1 week passed inside the Valenti mansion, and Olivia slowly learned how to live inside her gilded cage. Every morning at 7 o'clock, Marcus knocked and escorted her to Dominic's room for a bandage change. Every evening at 7 o'clock, they repeated the process. Between those 2 visits, she took her meals alone in her room. Lavish dishes she rarely had the appetite to enjoy. She was allowed to walk in the garden, though there were always at least 2 men in black suits trailing a few yards behind, silent and watchful. She was allowed to call Ethan every day, but Marcus always stood near enough to hear every word. She told her brother she was away for training. She told him everything was fine. She told him not to worry. Ethan believed her. He always had. And during that week, Olivia began to watch the world that belonged to Dominic Valenti. This mansion was not simply a home. It was the command center of an underground empire. Men from his organization came and went constantly, carrying sleek black bags, thick envelopes, faces lined with tension. They reported in, received instructions, then disappeared again. From time to time, Olivia heard someone shouting from deep below, and once in a while the faint, muffled sounds of pain drifting up from the basement, trapped by thick concrete walls. She tried not to think about what was happening down there. She tried not to imagine, but what struck her most was the way everyone looked at Dominic. It was not just respect, it was fear, carved into them as surely as bone. When he walked the halls, the household staff dipped their heads. His men moved aside, clearing his path, careful not to meet his eyes. Dominic Valenti didn't have to shout. He didn't have to threaten. His presence alone was a threat. During the dressing changes, Dominic began to ask questions about her. Short questions that sounded offhand, but Olivia knew nothing was accidental with this man. Why work the night shift? The pay is better. I need the money. You live alone, with a debt of $47,000 hanging over me. So yes, alone. Dominic made no comment, just watched her with those unreadable steel-gray eyes. And Olivia, though she hated to admit it, began to see different sides of him. She saw the way he treated the staff, never barking orders, always paying well, remembering each person's name. She saw him quietly press an envelope of cash into the cook's hands when he heard her mother was ill. She saw him arrange for the gardener's son to attend a private school. One sleepless night, she looked out her window and saw Dominic sitting alone on his balcony, facing the dark spread of Lake Michigan. His face then was neither cold nor menacing. It was simply tired and lonely. So lonely that Olivia felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest, the ache of someone who knew what it meant to be alone. Then the 7th night came. Olivia woke to an unfamiliar noise. The rumble of engines, raised voices. She slipped out of bed, opened her door, and was startled to find it unlocked. Perhaps whoever was posted outside had gone elsewhere. Curiosity tugged at her, insistent. She followed the sounds, down the staircase, through the rear of the house, toward the garage she had never seen. The garage door stood slightly open. Warm yellow light spilled through the gap, and Olivia saw. Dominic was standing in the middle of the garage, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hands stained with blood. In front of him, a man was tied to a chair, his face swollen and bruised, blood dripping from his nose and mouth. Marcus stood nearby with an iron bar in his hand, and Dominic, the Dominic she had cared for over the past week, was speaking in a voice so cold it made her skin crawl. You thought you could sell information to Petrov, and I would not find out. Begging, sobbing. Then the dull sound of blows landing. Olivia watched Dominic strike, each movement precise and brutal, without a flicker of hesitation. This was not the man who sat alone staring at the lake. This was a monster. She backed away, her foot catching on a metal trash can. The clatter rang out into the night. Dominic turned his head, his steel-gray eyes locked onto her through the narrow gap in the open door. No surprise, no anger, only a cool recognition that she had seen. He stepped out of the garage and came to stand in front of her, his hand still wet with another man's blood. This is my world, Olivia. His voice was low and even, with not a trace of apology. Do you still want to save me? The next night, Olivia walked into Dominic's room with the now familiar medical kit, but something between them had shifted. She didn't look into his eyes as she sat on the edge of the bed, her hands moving automatically to remove the old bandage. The images from the night before were still sharp in her mind, the blood on his skin, the pleading voice, the cold, unflinching violence. She worked in silence, and Dominic said nothing either, simply watched her with those unreadable steel-gray eyes. The room felt heavy with all the words left unsaid, with the question he had asked her in the garage, the one she had never answered. "You are afraid of me." Dominic's voice cut through the quiet, low and steady. Not a question, but a statement. Olivia's hands paused for a moment, then went back to cleaning the wound, which was beginning to heal. "I am afraid of violence," she answered, matching his calm tone. "I have seen enough of it. At the hospital. Everywhere." The words slipped out before she could stop them. She bit her lip, as if she had already revealed too much. Dominic was silent for a long time, studying her face, her eyes, the way she tried to bury the emotions roiling beneath the surface. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, almost gentle. "What have you seen, Olivia? What made you fear violence this much?" She could have refused to answer. She could have told him it was none of his business. But something about this night, about the charged silence between them, about the way he was looking at her, as if he truly wanted to know, loosened her tongue. "My father was an alcoholic," she began, her voice level, as if she were telling someone else's story. "He was not always like that. My mother used to say he was a good man before I was born. I don't remember that version. I remember bottles breaking, my mother crying, the sound of fists and kicks in the middle of the night." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing the faint scar on her left wrist she always kept hidden. "My mother got cancer when I was 14. We didn't have money for treatment, no insurance. She died 6 months later in a public hospital bed, holding my hand." Her voice hitched for a moment, but she forced herself to go on. "The last thing she said to me was to take care of Ethan. Don't let him live the life she lived." Dominic said nothing. He simply listened. "After she died, my father got worse. I became the new target for his rage. I learned to hide Ethan in the closet whenever I heard his unsteady footsteps. I learned to take the hits so my brother would not have to." She stopped, staring down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. "When I was 19, I called the police and fought for custody of Ethan. My father went to prison for 8 months. When he got out, he came to my apartment with a gun." Silence, thick and suffocating. "He didn't shoot me," Olivia whispered. "He shot himself in the head, right in front of me. Blood and brain matter all over the wall, all over my face, all over the white shirt I was wearing." Her fingers moved to the scar on her wrist, tracing it with a slight shake. "That night I took a razor into the bathroom. I wanted to end it. I was so tired, so exhausted. Then Ethan knocked on the door and said my name in that scared little voice. And I stopped." One tear slipped down her cheek and she brushed it away quickly. "I live for my brother Dominic, not for myself." The room sank into silence again. Olivia didn't dare look up, didn't want to see judgment or pity. But when she finally raised her head, she saw neither in those steel-gray eyes. She saw only understanding. "My father was killed when I was 18, Dominic said, his voice deep and distant, as if he were looking back through years of smoke and blood. "A hit. Our enemies wanted his empire. I was the eldest son. I had to take over. Not because I wanted to, but because if I didn't, my mother and my younger brother would die." He turned his gaze toward the window where the moonlight glittered over Lake Michigan. "I did everything I had to do to protect them. I became cold, ruthless, frightening. I killed my first man when I was 19, the one who ordered my father's death. I don't regret it. I can't regret it if I want to stay alive." His voice dropped. "My mother died of illness 5 years later. I didn't spend enough time with her. I was too busy fighting, building this empire, becoming the monster everyone feared. When she went, I didn't make it to her bedside in time to say goodbye." Olivia looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she saw the cracks in his armor. "I became a monster to protect the people I loved," Dominic said, bitterness roughening his words. "Then one day I realized I had no one left to love. My mother was gone. My brother—" He broke off, leaving the sentence unfinished. "I built all of this, and there was no one left to share it with." 2 people sat in a lavish room in the middle of the Chicago night, both carrying scars no one could see. A poor girl from the South Side with a childhood carved out of hell. A mafia kingpin with an empire soaked in blood. They were nothing alike. They came from worlds that could not have been more different. Yet in this moment they understood each other. Olivia laid her hand on Dominic's forearm, a light touch she had not planned. "We are both survivors." Dominic looked at her hand on his arm, then lifted his gaze to her eyes. And for the first time, Olivia didn't see the cold, untouchable crime lord. She saw a man who had lost everything: struggling to find a reason to keep going. Just like her, 2 weeks passed after the night they shared their scars. The connection between Olivia and Dominic changed, no longer just prisoner and captor, but something murkier, more complicated. The bandage changes were no longer strung so tight with silence. Now and then there were brief exchanges of words, a glance that lingered a little too long, a moment when her fingers brushed his skin and didn't move away as quickly as they should. Olivia didn't want to admit it, but she had begun to see Dominic differently. Then Vincent Valenti arrived and shattered everything. He came in the afternoon while Olivia was walking in the garden. A sleek black Porsche pulled up in front of the main entrance, and a man stepped out. He was 33 years old, attractive in a way completely unlike Dominic. If Dominic was all sharp granite and winter ice, then Vincent was polished marble, smooth and charming. His brown hair was neatly combed, his green eyes framed by an easy smile, his light gray suit fitting him like it had been made for him alone. He looked like a successful executive on the cover of a magazine, not the younger brother of a Mafia boss. Yet there was something in those green eyes that unsettled Olivia, something cold hiding behind the warmth, a snake wearing the skin of a dove. Vincent spotted her from a distance and walked over, his smile bright and open. "Ah, you must be Olivia Carter, the woman who saved my brother's life." He took her hand and held it a bit longer than courtesy required. "The Valenti family owes you a life. I am Vincent." "I know." Olivia gently pulled her hand free, forcing her voice to stay neutral. "Dominic mentioned you." "Oh, he mentioned me. That is surprising." Something flashed in Vincent's eyes, so quick Olivia almost missed it. Bitterness. Resentment. "My brother is not exactly the type who talks about family." He tilted his head, studying her. "So you are a nurse. Where do you work? Where do you live? Any family?" Too many questions. Too much interest. Olivia felt as if she were being interrogated under the soft cover of small talk. Dominic appeared in the doorway at the back of the house, his face turning to ice when he saw his brother talking to Olivia. "Vincent." Inside, not a greeting, a command. Vincent smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. "Yes, big brother." He turned to Olivia and gave a quick wink. "Very nice to meet you, Olivia. I hope we get the chance to talk more." Later, during dinner, which Olivia watched by accident through a narrow crack in the dining room door, she observed the two brothers together. Dominic was distant, giving curt answers, never quite meeting Vincent's gaze. Vincent tried to act cheerful, telling jokes, filling the silence with stories. But whenever Dominic looked away, his eyes darkened into something much uglier. Jealousy, hatred. She had seen that look before, in her father's eyes when he stared at her mother just before his fist came down. After Vincent left, Dominic came looking for Olivia. He stood in her doorway, his face set and serious. "Stay away from my brother." "Why?" "Because blood does not always mean loyalty." The steel gray of his eyes darkened. "Don't trust anyone in this house, Olivia. Not even those who carry the Valenti name." Dominic walked away, leaving Olivia with 1,000 questions and no answers. That night she could not sleep. Around 2 a.m. she left her room to get some water, and a voice carrying from the living room made her stop. Vincent's voice, low and urgent. "It is almost done. He trusts me. When the time comes, everything will belong to us. Petrov will get his share, and I will get mine." Olivia held her breath and stepped back into the shadows. Her heart pounded wildly. Petrov, the name she had heard Dominic speak, the enemy who had tried to kill him. And Vincent was talking to Petrov's people. Olivia knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how wrong. 3 weeks in the Valenti mansion, and Olivia realized that everything had changed. Dominic's wound had almost completely healed, leaving only a faint pink scar that would fade with time. She no longer needed to change his bandages every day, yet somehow they still found ways to see each other. A shared breakfast in the dining room, a brief conversation in the library, glances traded across a hallway, and that afternoon, when Dominic appeared in her doorway and said, "Walk with me," Olivia didn't refuse. For the first time since she had arrived, she stepped outside without a shadow escort of armed guards behind her. It was just her and Dominic, following the stone path that led down toward the shore of Lake Michigan. The sun was slipping toward the horizon, turning the sky into a wash of orange and violet, the last light of day scattering across the water like a million diamonds. A breeze drifted in from the lake, carrying the scent of water and flowers from the gardens behind them. It was breathtakingly beautiful. Olivia had never seen anything like it, not from her tiny Southside apartment whose window looked out on a narrow, filthy alley. "Do you like it?" Dominic asked, standing beside her, his steel-gray eyes also fixed on the water. "It is beautiful," Olivia whispered. "I have never seen a sunset like this." They stood in silence for a while, not the strained silence of the early days, but a quiet that felt almost easy, the kind that didn't need words. Then Dominic broke it with a question she had not expected. "Before all of this, what did you want? What was your dream?" Olivia looked at him, surprised. No one had asked her that in years. No one had cared. "A doctor," she said softly. "I wanted to become a doctor. I got a full scholarship for the pre-med program at the University of Chicago." "Why did you not go?" She let out a small, sad laugh. "Money, time, responsibility. My mother died, my father killed himself, and I had a younger brother who needed someone to raise him. Life didn't leave me much of a choice, Dominic. I had to let go of my dream in order to survive." Dominic was silent for a long time, watching the lake as it deepened into darker shades of purple while the sun slid away. Then he spoke, his voice low and sure. "If you want to go back to school, I will pay for it. All of it. Med school, books, living expenses, everything." Olivia turned to stare at him, certain she had misheard. "What did you say?" And then she saw something she had never seen before. Dominic Valenti smiled. Not the cold curve of a crime lord, not the mocking twist he gave his enemies. A real smile, warm. It softened the sharp edges of his face and brought a quiet light to those usually icy gray eyes. "I said you deserve a chance to follow your dream." He slid a hand into the pocket of his jacket, pulled out a new phone, the newest model, and placed it in her hand. "Call your brother whenever you want. No monitoring, no one listening." Olivia held the phone, her fingers trembling. "Why are you doing this?" Dominic didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, closer still, until she could feel the heat of him in the cooling evening air. He raised his hand, resting his fingers against her cheek, the calluses brushing her skin as if he were afraid she might break. His steel-gray eyes softened, warmed, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "You don't belong here, Olivia," he said, his voice low and rough. "You deserve a better life than this, better than my world, better than me." "Then why will you not let me go?" she whispered, her voice unsteady. Dominic closed his eyes for a heartbeat, as if fighting something inside himself. When he opened them again, Olivia saw something she had never expected, reflected there. Desire, pain, and a tenderness she had never believed a Mafia boss could feel. "Because I am selfish, Olivia," he said quietly, his fingers still tracing the line of her cheek. "For the first time in my life, I want to keep something just for myself, and that something is you." Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought he would kiss her. She wanted him to kiss her. But Dominic only held her gaze for a long, long moment, his gray eyes full of unsaid words. Then he let his hand fall, stepped back, and turned away, walking toward the mansion without looking back. Olivia remained by the edge of Lake Michigan, the sunset gone, darkness gathering, her heart still pounding. She didn't know whether she was afraid or hopeful. She only knew that something had shifted, and there was no way to go back. Gunfire shattered the quiet of the mansion at 2 a.m. Olivia jerked upright in bed, her heart racing, unsure if she was dreaming. Then shots rang out again, closer this time, followed by shouts, breaking glass, the pounding of feet in the hallway outside. This was not a dream. It was real. She rushed to the door, hand on the handle, ready to pull it open. But the survival instincts honed by 14 years with a violent father stopped her. She backed away into the corner of the room, squeezing herself behind the large oak wardrobe, heart thudding like a drum. The gunshots moved nearer. Men were shouting in Russian out in the hall. Petrov. Nikolai Petrov's men were inside the house. Olivia remembered Vincent's secret call, the name whispered in the dark. Vincent had betrayed them. And now Dominic's enemies were here. Her door flew open with a deafening crash. A man stormed in, his face hidden behind a black cloth, a gun in his hand, cold blue eyes sweeping the room. They landed on her, and his mouth curled into a cruel smile as he raised the weapon. Olivia thought this was it. She thought of Ethan, of him being alone in the world, of the promise she had made to their mother that she would not be able to keep. Then Dominic appeared behind the attacker like a shadow. He grabbed the man by the neck, twisted, and snapped it in one swift, terrifying motion. The body crumpled to the floor, the gun clattering across the wood, but in the struggle the blade the attacker had drawn sliced a long gash down Dominic's arm, blood soaking his sleeve. Worse, the old wound at his side, the one she had tended for 3 weeks, had torn open. Blood spread across his white shirt like a blooming, deadly flower. "Go." Dominic seized her hand and pulled her from the room. "Stay with me." They ran down the hallway and Olivia saw hell. Bodies strewn across the white marble floor, now spattered and streaked with red, Dominic's men and intruders alike. Crystal chandeliers lay shattered, shards of glass glittering like diamonds in the wash of red emergency lights. Gunfire crackled from every direction inside the mansion, mingled with shouts in Russian and Italian. Dominic dragged her along, his other hand gripping a pistol, cutting down anyone who tried to block their path. They reached the ground floor, near the doors that led to the back garden. When they were trapped, 3 attackers stood at the end of the corridor with guns trained on them. There was no way through. Dominic shoved Olivia into the corner, using his own body as a shield, his back turned squarely toward the enemy. "Dominic," she cried, trying to pull him back, but he didn't move. "Be quiet," he ground out, raising his gun. "Get down." Shots exploded. Bullets tore through the air. Olivia lost track of how many seconds or minutes passed. All she knew was the shaking of her own body, her eyes squeezed shut, her ears ringing with gunfire, and Dominic standing in front of her like a wall of iron. Then the shooting stopped. Marcus's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "Boss, we have secured the area." Olivia opened her eyes. The 3 attackers were sprawled on the floor, blood pooling beneath them. Marcus and the elite team were charging in from the main entrance, weapons ready, faces taut. They had made it. They had pushed the invaders back. And Dominic collapsed. He went down right in front of her without a sound, like a tree cut clean through. Olivia screamed, dropping to her knees beside him, and saw the blood. A lot of blood. The old wound in his side had torn wide open, the gash along his arm was deep enough to show bone, and there was a fresh bullet wound in his left shoulder she had not seen him take. Dominic, look at me." She slapped his cheek, but those steel-gray eyes were sliding shut. The nurse in her took over. Olivia tore open Dominic's shirt and pressed a strip of fabric hard against the wound at his side where the blood was pouring fastest. She swung toward Marcus, who stood stunned nearby, and shouted with a command in her voice she had not known she possessed. "Medical supplies. Bring them here, now, and call Dr. Chen, immediately." Marcus ran. Olivia kept the pressure steady, one hand on his side, the other pressing on his shoulder. Dominic's blood was hot and slick on her skin, just as it had been that first night in the dim parking garage 3 weeks ago. But this time was different. This time she was not saving a stranger. She was fighting for the man whose hand had rested on her cheek at sunset, the man who had said he wanted to keep her for himself, the man who had turned his body into a shield to stop the bullets meant for her. "Don't die," she whispered, tears slipping down her face without her noticing. "You are not allowed to die. Do you hear me? You promised to pay for med school. You don't get to die before you keep your promise." Dominic didn't answer. His steel-gray eyes stayed closed, his face waxy and drained of all color. Olivia kept pressing on the wounds, kept saying his name, kept pleading, and there, among the bodies and spent shell casings, in the stench of gunpowder and the thick metallic smell of blood, she faced the truth she had been trying to deny for the past 3 weeks. She didn't want to lose him. She could not lose him. Somehow, this cold-blooded mafia boss had become someone who mattered to her. Morning light slipped through the crack in the curtains when Dominic opened his eyes. His head felt heavy. His body ached as if a truck had run him over, and the memories of the night before came flooding back like a nightmare. Gunfire, blood, enemies pouring into his home. And Olivia, her hazel eyes wet with tears, her hands covered in his blood, her voice begging him not to die. He tried to move and a bolt of pain ripped from his shoulder down to his side, forcing his teeth together, but the pain faded the moment he looked to the side of the bed. Olivia sat in an armchair, her head resting on the mattress, brown hair spilling over the white sheets. She was sleeping, but even in sleep her face held an anxious tension, her brows drawn, her hand lying close to his as if afraid he might disappear if she let him out of reach. She had stayed with him all night. She had not left. Dominic lay still, watching her sleep, and felt something strange swell in his chest. When was the last time anyone had worried about him like this? He tried to remember, and the memory took him back 20 years. He had been 16, burning with fever after a fight with a rival gang. His mother had sat by his bed all night, laying cool cloths on his forehead and singing lullabies in Italian as if he were still a little boy. That had been the last time. After that, his father died, he became the boss, and no one had dared to worry about Dominic Valenti again. People feared him, bowed to him, obeyed him, but no one cared about him. Until this girl. Olivia stirred, her eyelids fluttering before they opened slowly. Sleep-blurred hazel met steady steel gray, and she jolted upright as if shocked. "You are awake," she blurted, her hand flying to his forehead. Checking his pulse, checking his bandages. "How do you feel? Where does it hurt?" "I will get Dr. Chen." Dominic closed his fingers around her wrist, holding her in place. "I am fine." His voice was rough from disuse. "You stayed all night." Olivia stopped, looking down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. "Someone had to monitor you. There is Dr. Chen. There is Marcus." "I don't trust them," she said quietly, though her tone was firm. Dominic studied her, taking in the dark smudges under her eyes, the faint traces of dried blood on her sleeve, the way she was trying to seem calm, while her hands still trembled slightly. "You should have run when you had the chance," he said, his voice low. "Last night was chaos. No one was guarding your door. You could have gone." "I am not running," Olivia answered, her hazel eyes locking with his without flinching. "Not anymore." "Why?" Dominic asked, and in that single word lay everything he didn't understand. About her, about himself, about whatever was forming between them that he could not name. "Why did you stay? Why did you save me?" Olivia was quiet for a long moment, then she sighed, her voice soft as breath. "Because I don't know. I only know that when I saw you fall, when I saw your blood on my hands, I could not think about anything except keeping you alive." She paused, swallowing. "I didn't want to lose you, Dominic. I can't lose anyone else." And Dominic, the cold-hearted Mafia boss, the man who had killed without blinking, who had built an empire out of blood and iron, did something he had not done with anyone since his mother died. He pulled her toward him, his hand at the back of her neck, and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not soft or tentative. It was the kiss of a drowning man clawing for air, a kiss full of hunger and desperation, the meeting of two broken souls grasping for each other in the dark. Olivia kissed him back, her hands clinging to his shoulders, forgetting about the wounds, forgetting about the pain, knowing only the heat of him and the taste of him on her lips. Then Dominic broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, his breath hot and uneven across her mouth. "I can't drag you into my hell, Olivia," he rasped. "You saw last night. That is my life. Blood, death. Enemies trying to kill me every day." Olivia raised her hand and touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the scar along his jaw. "I have been in hell for a long time, Dominic," she whispered. 14 years with a violent father, 8 years carrying everything alone. I know what hell is." She stopped and looked deep into his steel-gray eyes. "At least here, in your hell, I am not alone." They looked at each other, two people layered with scars, two souls well acquainted with darkness. Both of them understood that they had crossed a line. There was no way back. 1 week after the attack, the Valenti mansion still bore the marks of that night of terror. Bullet holes in the walls had been patched. Blood had been scrubbed from the marble floors, yet a heavy, somber weight hung over the house like a mourning veil. 12 of Dominic's men had died in the assault, men who had served him loyally for years, and the Mafia boss swore he would find out who had opened the door and let the wolves in. This attack could not have happened without someone on the inside. Someone had revealed the location of his bedroom, the guard rotation, the weak point in the security system. Someone he trusted. Marcus led the investigation, and after 7 days of searching, interrogating, and tracking, he walked into Dominic's study with a face as dark as a thundercloud. Olivia was sitting beside Dominic, her hand resting lightly on his forearm, a gesture that had become natural between them since that night. She watched as Marcus set a briefcase on the desk, and she saw the way Dominic's body tensed. "I found the traitor," Marcus said, his voice heavy. Dominic opened the case. Inside were security camera photos, phone records, and surveillance reports. Olivia leaned in and saw a familiar face in the glossy images. Vincent. Dominic's younger brother. He was shaking hands with a silver-haired man she didn't recognize in an upscale restaurant 2 weeks before the attack. "That man is Nikolai Petrov," Marcus explained, his voice tight. "We also traced calls from Vincent's private phone to one of Petrov's lieutenants. 3 calls in the week before the attack, each one more than 20 minutes long." Dominic didn't speak. He stared at the photos, at the undeniable evidence, and his face turned to stone. Olivia could feel the pain tearing through him, even though he kept it buried. Vincent was his only brother, his last blood, the person he had spent his whole life protecting, the one he had built his empire for, the one he had killed to keep safe. I know this hurts, Olivia said softly, her hand tightening on his arm. But you have to face it. He is my brother. Dominic's voice was low and fractured like cracked glass. I have protected him all my life. When our father died, I was the one who took on everything so he could live a normal life. Everything I did was for him. Olivia thought of her own father, of the man she had loved and feared, the man who had given her bruises and nightmares, the man who had ended his life in front of her like a final curse. Sometimes the people we protect hurt us the most, she whispered. I know that better than anyone. Dominic gave the order to bring Vincent in. He arrived that evening, wearing the same familiar smile and a perfectly cut suit. But as soon as he stepped into the study and saw the photographs spread out across the desk, that smile died on his lips. Vincent tried to deny everything, performing with the polish of a professional actor, his eyes reddening as if he were about to cry, his voice trembling as he swore loyalty. But when Dominic played the recording of his call with Petrov's man, the mask fell away. You always had everything, Dominic, Vincent snarled, his face twisted with hatred. Father loved you more. The empire went to you. The respect, the power, all of it was yours. And me, I was just your shadow. The kid brother of Dominic Valenti. No one saw me, no one cared about me. I am tired of living in your shadow. I gave you everything, Dominic answered, his voice ice cold, though his steel-gray eyes burned with pain. Money, power, protection. What were you missing? I was missing a chance to be myself, Vincent shouted. I wanted to build something of my own, not live off what you handed me. Petrov promised me Chicago if I helped him take you down. And I said yes, I would do it again if I had the chance. Marcus stepped forward to restrain Vincent, but Vincent was faster. A smoke bomb clattered to the floor and burst, filling the room with thick white fog. When it cleared, Vincent was gone, the only trace of him, the sound of an engine roaring away into the night and the shattered window he had escaped through. Dominic stood there, staring at the broken glass, and Olivia saw something collapse inside him. Not fury, not rage, just the exhausted grief of a man who had lost too much and had now been betrayed by his own blood. That night Dominic sat alone in the darkened study, no lights on, no drink in his hand, just staring out at the ink-black surface of Lake Michigan. Olivia found him there and said nothing. She simply sat beside him and laid her hand over his. Dominic didn't speak, but he didn't let go of her hand. 2 days after Vincent fled, Olivia was in the mansion's reading room when the new phone Dominic had given her buzzed. A message from an unknown number, a video file attached. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, and her world fell apart. Ethan, her brother, the boy she had sacrificed everything to raise, the dream she had let go to protect, the person she had lived for through 8 long years. Ethan was sitting on an old wooden chair, his arms tied behind his back with rope, silver tape over his mouth. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, dried blood at the corner of his lips, and standing right behind him, one hand clamped on Ethan's shoulder, the other pressing a gun to his temple, was Vincent Valenti. Hello, Miss Carter. Vincent's voice floated through the video, sweet and venomous. Or should I call you my brother's lover? Your little brother was very cooperative. He only cried a little when we picked him up from the dorm. I hope you and Dominic will be just as cooperative. He smiled, the same smile she had once thought charming, now twisted into something demonic. I have a small proposal. Dominic will come to warehouse number 723 on West 55th Street in the South Side. He will come alone, unarmed, and he will sign over leadership of the Valenti organization to me. If he does, your brother walks free. If he does not, Vincent pressed the gun harder against Ethan's head, and the boy groaned behind the tape. Then you will receive pieces of him in the mail. You have 24 hours. Don't try anything clever. The video ended. The screen went black. Olivia heard a scream, raw and broken, before she realized it was coming from her own throat. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. Her knees gave way and she collapsed beside it, her kneecaps striking the cold marble, but she felt no pain. She saw only Ethan's battered face, his terrified eyes staring into the camera, the gun at his temple. Her brother, the boy she had promised her dying mother she would protect, the boy who was suffering now because of her, because of Dominic, because of the world she had been pulled into. Dominic found her on the floor of the reading room, sobbing, the phone lying a few steps away. He picked it up, watched the video, and his face turned to stone. Not with indifference, but with a fury so intense it could have burned the world to ash if he let it loose. Please? Olivia grabbed his shirt, her eyes red and swollen, her voice shredded. Please save my brother. I will do anything. Anything you want. Just save Ethan. He is everything to me. He is the only reason I am still alive. If he dies, Olivia. Dominic sank to his knees in front of her, his hands closing around her shoulders, his steel-gray eyes locking onto hers. Look at me. Look at my eyes. She lifted her head, tears still streaming down her cheeks. I will save your brother, he said. Even if it costs me my life. Do you understand? I give you my word. I am going with you, Olivia said at once, her voice shaking but firm. He is my brother. I need to be there. No, Dominic shook his head, his tone absolute. You stay here, where it is safe. You can't force me to stay. Ethan needs me. Dominic framed her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. And you are the woman I love, he said, his voice low and fractured. I will not lose both of you. Do you understand? If you go there and something happens to you, I will never forgive myself. Stay here. Marcus will protect you. I will bring your brother back. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle and aching, then rose and walked out. Olivia heard him giving orders to Marcus, heard engines roaring to life, heard the crunch of tires over gravel as the convoy pulled away, and she knew Dominic was walking into a trap. Vincent would not keep his word. He wanted Dominic dead and the Empire for himself, and Ethan was only bait. Marcus watched over her in the living room, his face grim, but even the most loyal right-hand man had to use the bathroom. Olivia waited, counting each second, and when Marcus disappeared behind the bathroom door, she moved. She slipped out the back, where one of the crew's cars waited with the keys still in the ignition. An Audi, black, not the most expensive vehicle in the fleet, but plenty fast. She slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and shot down the drive before Marcus's shout could catch up with her. She knew the way to the south side. She had grown up there. She knew every alley, every corner, every abandoned warehouse where criminals liked to hide. And she would not sit safely behind marble walls while her brother knelt with a gun to his head and the man she loved walked toward his death. She had lost her mother. She had lost her father. In the worst way possible, she would not lose anyone else, even if it meant she had to die in their place. Warehouse number 7, 123 on West 55th Street, sat in the middle of an abandoned industrial district in the South Side, the landscape of Olivia's childhood, where she knew every cracked sidewalk and every shadowed gap between buildings. She parked the Audi 2 blocks away, killed the lights, and watched. Dominic's convoy had arrived ahead of her. 3 black sport utility vehicles lined up outside the chain-link fence, headlights illuminating the peeling red brick of the old warehouse. Marcus and the elite team stood outside, heavily armed, but keeping their distance as Vincent had demanded. And Dominic was walking into the warehouse alone, back straight, steps steady, like a king striding toward his final battle. Olivia slipped out of the car and moved through the dark like a cat. She knew this area. She knew there was a rear entrance on the west side of the warehouse, where street kids used to crawl in to escape the rain. She knew the narrow passageway between 2 buildings that led straight to it. She knew how to survive in the South Side, and tonight she would use every scrap of that knowledge. Inside, Dominic stood in the middle of a wide, dusty space that smelled of mold and rust. Dim ceiling lights cast weak pools of yellow, leaving shadows layered across the floor like a stage set for tragedy. And at the far end, surrounded by more than 20 gunmen, half of them traitorous Valenti soldiers, the rest hard-faced Slavic men loyal to Nikolai Petrov, stood Vincent. Dominic's brother was smiling, the smile of a man who believed he had already won. One hand gripping a gun pointed at Ethan's head, the other resting on the back of the wooden chair where the boy sat tied up, bruised and pale, terror in his eyes as he fought to keep his chin up. "You are right on time," Vincent said, his tone dripping mockery. "I always knew you were a man of your word. It is one of your many weaknesses. Let him go," Dominic replied, his voice as cold as winter. "He has nothing to do with what is between us." "Oh, but he has everything to do with it," Vincent laughed softly. "He is the brother of the woman you love. He is the only thing that could bring you here alone, unarmed, ready to kneel in front of me." He stepped closer, keeping the gun pressed to Ethan's skull. 18 years, Dominic. 18 years in your shadow. When father died, he gave everything to you. The empire, the power, the respect. And me. I was just Dominic Valenti's brother. No one saw me. No one feared me. I was only a shadow. "We are brothers," Dominic said, his tone still calm, though his steel-gray eyes were filled with pain. "We can share. We can run this together. It is not too late." "Share." Vincent burst out laughing, the sound echoing through the warehouse like the cry of crows. You don't know the meaning of that word. You only know how to take power, respect, the loyalty of every man in this room, and now even the woman I wanted. His green eyes went darker, poisoned by resentment. She is beautiful, you know that. From the first moment I saw her in the garden, I wanted her. But she only saw you. Always you. Everything good belongs to you. Dominic clenched his jaw, his hands curling into tight fists. Olivia is not some prize to be fought over. She is a person. She is your weakness. Vincent turned the gun on Dominic, his other hand still gripping Ethan's shoulder. The only thing that can make the cold-blooded Mafia king Dominic Valenti go soft. The only thing that brought you in here alone and ready to die. And I'm going to use that weakness to destroy you. Let him go, Dominic repeated, his voice still calm but carrying a hard line of steel. Settle this between us, like men. Vincent stared at him for a long moment, then smiled. You still think you can give orders. You still think you are the boss. He lifted his free hand and gestured to his men. Kill him. Gunfire erupted. Dominic dove to the side as the first bullets sliced through the air, rolling behind a rusted steel pillar and drawing the hidden gun from his pant leg, the one Vincent didn't know about. Marcus and the elite team stormed in through the main doors at the sound of the shots, and the warehouse turned into hell. Bullets flew like rain. Shouts and curses in Italian and Russian bounced off the walls. Bodies fell. Blood spread across the cracked concrete floor. In that chaos, no one noticed the small, rusted ventilation grate near the floor being pried open. It was too small for a man, but Olivia forced herself through. Metal scraped against her skin, tearing through her shirt and slicing her back, but she didn't feel the pain. She only felt the adrenaline screaming in her blood. She crawled into the shadows, gasping for air, her hands closing around a heavy, discarded iron pipe. She had survived hell once. She would survive it again. The warehouse was a battlefield. Bullets tore through the air between the rusted pillars, sparks flaring whenever metal struck metal. Gunshots cracked like thunder. Men screamed in pain, swore in different languages. Bodies hit the concrete with heavy, dull thuds. The air was thick with the stench of powder and blood. Olivia moved through the darkness, hugging the flaking red brick wall, the metal bar clutched in her hand. She didn't look at the fight raging in the center of the warehouse. She focused on one thing only: Ethan. Her brother was still tied to a chair in the far corner, maybe 20 meters away, with one guard standing beside him, gun in hand, eyes fixed on the battle. Olivia stepped closer, each footfall light as a feather, her survival instincts honed by 14 years with a violent father guiding her every move. She knew how to walk without making a sound. She knew how to slip through shadows. She knew how to stay alive. She waited. She timed her breathing with the deafening roar of Dominic's gunfire. Just as a grenade exploded on the other side of the room, distracting the guard, Olivia lunged. She didn't aim for the head skulls or too hard to break. The nurse in her took over, identifying the weakest point. She swung the iron pipe with desperate violence, striking him squarely at the base of the neck, right where the spine meets the skull. A sickening crunch. The man didn't even cry out. His nervous system simply shut down. He dropped like a stone. She rushed to Ethan's side and grabbed a shard of glass from the ground, sawing through the ropes binding his wrists. Ethan tore the tape from his mouth, his eyes wide with shock. "Liv, what are you doing here?" "Be quiet." Olivia grabbed his hand and dragged him to his feet. "Come with me. Now." They headed for the back door where she had slipped in, keeping as far from the firefight as they could. 10 meters, 5 meters. Freedom was right there in front of them. Then a hand seized Olivia's hair and yanked her backward. She cried out in pain and twisted around. Vincent stood in front of her. He looked unhinged, his eyes bloodshot, blood from a cut on his forehead running down his face. But his grip on the gun was steady, the barrel aimed straight at her. "You thought you could run," Vincent laughed. The sound cracked and wild above the roar of gunfire. "You thought your brother meant anything. He is just bait. You are what I want." He jammed the muzzle against her forehead, cold metal pressing into her skin. "Killing you will break Dominic completely. He will lose everything, just like he took everything from me." Ethan lunged forward, trying to pull Vincent away, but Vincent kicked him aside as if he were kicking a stray dog. Ethan's head struck a steel pillar and he crumpled to the floor, motionless. Panic tore through Olivia's chest. "Look at your brother," Vincent whispered, his voice sickly sweet and cruel. "Weak and useless, just like everyone around you. But don't worry, you will see him again. In hell." He pulled the trigger. The bullet never touched Olivia. Dominic came out of the shadows in a rush, throwing himself in front of her, and the bullet tore into his chest. Olivia saw it in slow motion. His broad body jerked as the slug ripped through flesh and bone. Blood burst from the wound just above his left chest, where his heart beat. His steel-gray eyes widened, not with pain, but with relief. Relief that she was still alive. "No!" Olivia screamed, the sound ripping her throat raw. Vincent laughed and lifted the gun again, aiming at them both. A hero to the end. Touching, big brother. But now you both die. Another shot rang out, not from Vincent's gun. His head snapped back, a neat hole opening between his brows. Vincent dropped like a puppet whose strings had been cut, eyes still open in frozen disbelief. Marcus stood behind him, his pistol smoking, his face carved from stone. Olivia didn't see Marcus. She didn't see Vincent sprawled lifeless on the floor. She saw only Dominic. He was sinking down slowly, his knees hitting the ground first before his weight sagged entirely into her arms. Olivia dropped with him, catching him as best she could. His blood poured out over her hands, hot and thick, soaking her skin. The third time. This was the third time she held this man with his blood on her hands. The first time in the hospital garage. The second time after the attack on the mansion. And now the third, in an abandoned South Side warehouse, the place where she had grown up, where everything had begun and might now end. "Dominic," she whispered, pressing both hands over the wound in his chest. "Look at me. Open your eyes. Don't close them." The steel-gray eyes opened, clouded by agony yet still seeking hers. A faint smile tugged at his blood-smeared lips. "You don't listen," he rasped. "I told you to stay home." "Be quiet," Olivia sobbed, tears streaming down her face and falling onto his skin. "You are not allowed to die. Do you hear me? You are not allowed." But his eyes were starting to close, and she felt as if her heart were shattering into a million pieces. The last shots faded. The warehouse fell into a heavy, suffocating silence broken only by harsh breathing and the groans of the wounded. Bodies lay scattered across the cracked concrete, blood pooling in dark puddles under the dim lights. The air reeked of gunpowder and death. But Olivia saw none of it. She saw only the man in her arms, his blood surging from the hole in his chest, spilling through her fingers even as she pressed down so hard her arms shook. Ethan was on his feet again, standing nearby, his face white with shock, his eyes huge as he took in the scene. He had been kidnapped, beaten, nearly killed, and now he was watching his sister cradle a dying Mafia boss in the middle of a warehouse full of corpses. "Ethan!" Olivia shouted, her voice cracking with urgency and command, the voice of an emergency room nurse who lived at the edge of life and death. "Get cloth, anything to help stop the bleeding, and call for a car. Right now." Ethan jolted as if he had been shocked, then ran to Marcus, who was barking orders to the remaining men. Olivia turned back to Dominic, her hands never leaving the wound. The blood kept coming, too much blood. She knew the bullet had passed dangerously close to his heart. Without surgery in the next few minutes, he would die. His steel-gray eyes opened again, glazed with pain, but still finding hers. What broke her heart was the way he tried to smile. "Twice in a garage," he whispered, his voice ragged and broken. "Now a warehouse. You really need to stop saving me in places like this. Be quiet." Olivia's tears dripped onto his chest, mixing with the blood. "You are not dying. Do you hear me? You are not allowed to die." "Olivia." Dominic lifted his hand, trembling, reaching for her face, but his strength failed, and his hand fell halfway. "No," she cried, keeping one hand pressed to his chest and catching his with the other, squeezing it tight. "You don't get to say goodbye. Do you hear me? You owe me. You promised to pay for med school so I could become a doctor. You don't get to die before you pay that debt. You don't get to die until I say so." Dominic let out a faint laugh, his eyes lighting for an instant. "You always know how to give orders." "Then obey them," Olivia choked out. "Keep your eyes open. Look at me. Don't close them." But his eyelids were growing heavier, his steel-gray gaze dimming. "You are safe now," he breathed. "That is enough." "It is not enough," Olivia sobbed. "It is not. You are not done. You don't get to go." Marcus pulled up with a black sport utility vehicle, and the men lifted Dominic onto a makeshift stretcher fashioned from coats and wooden beams. They carried him to the car, and Olivia climbed in beside him. No one tried to stop her. She knelt on the floor next to him. "The kit!" she screamed at Marcus. "Give me the trauma kit." Marcus threw a black bag into the back. Olivia ripped it open with bloody fingers, grabbing a packet of hemostatic gauze, the kind used by soldiers in war. "This is going to hurt," she whispered. though he couldn't hear her. She didn't hesitate. She shoved the gauze deep into the bullet hole, packing the wound tight to clot the blood right at the source. Dominic's unconscious body arched off the floor, a guttural groan escaping his lips from the sheer agony. Tears blurred her vision, but her hands didn't shake. She taped it down, sealing the chest to keep his lung from collapsing. Only then did she clamp her hands over it. The car tore through the night, siren wailing, ripping open the silence of the south side. Ethan sat in the front seat, turned halfway around, watching his sister with eyes full of fear. Marcus drove like a madman, running red lights, weaving through narrow streets only locals would know. But Olivia saw none of it. All she saw was Dominic's face growing paler, his lips taking on a bluish tint. She bent close, her mouth near his ear, whispering words she was not sure she would have had the courage to say under any other circumstance. "You don't get to leave me, Dominic. I lost my mother. I lost my father. I have already lost enough. You don't get to be next. Do you hear me? You have to live. For me. Because I need you. And..." Dominic didn't answer. His steel gray eyes stayed shut. But his hand, the one Olivia was gripping so tightly, closed faintly around her fingers. And she knew he was still fighting. The Valenti mansion was wrapped in a heavy, suffocating quiet when the convoy brought Dominic home. Dr. Chen, the family's private physician, had flown in from New York the moment he received the news and was waiting with a full medical team. They rushed Dominic into the operating room, a space outfitted like a small private hospital, and the door shut in Olivia's face with a cold click. 6 hours. 6 long hours she sat on a hard wooden chair in the hallway, her back against the wall, her eyes locked on the stark white door. Dominic's blood still stained her hands, dark and dried in the grooves of her palms, under her nails, along her wrists. She didn't wash it off. She could not. It felt as if washing away the blood would somehow wash away what was left of him. Ethan sat beside her, his left arm neatly bandaged after striking the steel pillar in the warehouse. A minor injury, the doctor had said. A few days of rest. But her 21-year-old brother didn't leave. He stayed by her side in silence, watching her with eyes full of questions he didn't quite dare to ask. At last, when the clock crept toward 4 in the morning and the silence had stretched too far, Ethan finally spoke. "You love him, do you not?" Olivia didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ethan had seen the way she had held Dominic in the warehouse. He had heard her sobbing, begging. He had watched her refuse to move even an inch away from him. The answer was written in everything she had done. In her mind, moments with Dominic played like a film. The first time in the underground garage, his steel gray eyes clouded by pain yet still pleading with her not to call the police. The bandage changes in his bedroom, her hands brushing his skin, feeling the heat and the beat of his heart beneath white gauze. The night they shared their scars, 2 broken souls finding each other in the dark. Their first kiss after the attack, tasting of blood and desperate need, the taste of 2 people who had hit the bottom of despair and somehow found each other there. And the words he had spoken before walking into the warehouse, words whose full weight she only understood now. "You are the woman I love. I will not lose both of you." The operating room door swung open. Dr. Chen stepped out, his face drawn with exhaustion after 6 hours at the table, but there was a faint light of relief in his eyes. Olivia shot to her feet, her heart pounding, almost afraid to breathe. "He will live," Dr. Chen said, his voice rough with fatigue. "The bullet passed close to the heart but didn't hit it. It is a miracle. I removed the bullet and repaired the damaged tissue. He has lost a great deal of blood and will need time to recover. But he will live," Olivia cried. For the first time in her life, she cried from relief instead of pain. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she didn't try to stop them, didn't try to hide them. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, and she wept on his shoulder like a child. When there were no tears left, Olivia walked into the room. Dominic lay on the white bed, his chest wrapped in bandages, his face pale but his breathing steady. The heart monitor beside him beeped in a steady rhythm, the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. She sat down in the chair at his side, reached out, and took his hand. Warm, alive. She didn't let go. 1 week passed after that terrible night in the warehouse. Dominic woke on the 3rd day, and from then on he slowly regained strength under Dr. Chen's care and Olivia's constant presence. She didn't leave the mansion. She hardly left his room. She only went back to her own room for a few hours of sleep before returning to the chair by his bed. Ethan had gone back to school once his injuries had healed, carrying Olivia's promise that she would come home soon. But she stayed, by the side of the man who had thrown himself in front of a bullet for her. That afternoon, as the light of sunset poured through the window and bathed the room in a soft golden orange. Dominic sat propped up against his pillows and watched Olivia reading in the chair beside his bed. His steel-gray eyes had regained their sharpness, though his face still held a hint of pallor. "You can go," he said quietly, his voice low and gentle. "I keep my promises. You are free." Olivia lifted her head and set the book aside. "Do you want me to go?" Dominic closed his eyes for a moment, as if her question hurt more than the wound in his chest. "No, but I have no right to keep you. My world is too dangerous. You have seen it. Blood, death, betrayal. You deserve better than—" He broke off, his voice fraying. "Better than me. Let me decide that," Olivia answered, rising and stepping closer to the bed. "And what is your decision?" She sat lightly on the edge of the mattress, her fingers brushing through his dark hair, tracing the scar along his jaw. "I need time. Not to leave you, but to put my life in order. Ethan needs me. My work needs me. I can't disappear from my old world forever. But that does not mean that—" "Mean what?" Dominic asked, his steel-gray gaze searching her face. Olivia smiled, the first true smile she had managed in many days. "That I don't love you." Dominic looked at her, and she saw something soften and warm and brighten in those gray eyes. He lifted his hand, slid it to the back of her neck, drew her down, and kissed her. Not like their first kiss, raw with hunger and desperation. This one was gentler, softer, full of unspoken promises, full of hope. A week later, Olivia chose to leave the mansion. She wrote a letter and left it for Dominic while he slept, unwilling to face a direct farewell. In the letter, she thanked him for saving her life and Ethan's, thanked him for showing her she was worthy of love, and told him she needed time to put her life back together. She didn't say goodbye. She could not. Her old Honda Civic rolled through the iron gates of the Valenti estate as dusk settled. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, watching her with anxious eyes. "Are you going back?" he asked. Olivia didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the road, her hands tight around the wheel. On the way back to the south side, as the familiar buildings of the poor neighborhood came into view, Olivia glanced in the rearview mirror and saw it, a black sedan following at a polite distance, not close enough to alarm anyone, not far enough to lose sight of her. She recognized the car. She recognized the way it moved. She knew it belonged to Dominic's men. She smiled, a small but honest smile. "He will never really let me go." Back at the Valenti mansion, Dominic stood at the study window, staring out at the lake, the surface of Michigan glittering in the late afternoon light. In his hand he held the handkerchief Olivia had used to stanch his bleeding the first night they met, the dried dark stains still visible. It was the only thing of hers he had kept. Marcus stepped into the room and came to stand beside him. "Are you sure you want to let her go?" "Boss." Dominic didn't turn, his eyes still on the lake. "She will come back, or I will go to her. And if she does not want that—" Dominic turned then, and in the steel gray of his eyes Marcus saw something he had never seen before in nearly 18 years at his side. Hope, love, and an absolute resolve. "She is the only one who saved me when the whole world wanted me dead. She saw the monster in me and stayed anyway. She loves me not because of who I am out there, but because of what I am to her. Wherever she goes, I will never truly let her go." Olivia reached her tiny studio apartment in the south side after dark. She opened the door, flipped on the light, and looked around at the familiar space. The narrow single bed that creaked, the cracked walls with their damp stains, the rust-stained faucet. Everything was the same, but she was not. She had changed. She knew now what it meant to be loved, to be protected, to be cherished. She walked to the window and looked out into the narrow alley below, the same overflowing trash cans, the same darkness, and across the street, parked unobtrusively, the black sedan. Still there, still watching over her, still guarding her from a distance. Olivia touched the faint scar on her left wrist, the scar from the night she had almost surrendered her life. And she smiled, for the first time in many years, the smile of someone who has found a reason to live, someone to love, a future to move toward. "He will not let go," she whispered into the night beyond the glass. "And maybe I don't want him to." Had Olivia Carter escaped the darkness? Or had she only just found the darkness she could accept as her own? She didn't yet know the answer. But one thing was certain. Her life would never again be empty, because Dominic Valenti, the crime boss who would never let her go, was waiting for her, and she, in her own way, was waiting for herself to be ready to return. Their story closes here, but their journey does not end. It continues somewhere beyond the last page, like a small light at the end of a tunnel, like a fragile shoot of green rising from ashes. And that is the lesson this story quietly offers to all of us. No matter how far life pushes you into the darkest corners, no matter how many invisible scars you carry beneath your clothes and behind your smile, there is always someone out there meant for you. Someone who can see the beauty in your broken pieces and chooses to stay. Love is not perfect. People are not perfect. But it is exactly that imperfection that allows us to find one another. Olivia once wanted to step away from life entirely, but her brother's frightened voice at the bathroom door pulled her back. Dominic turned himself into a monster to protect the ones he loved, only to rediscover his own humanity reflected in the eyes of a poor night shift nurse. They saved each other not with money, not with power, but with understanding and acceptance. And that is what true love looks like. If this story has touched your heart, we would be honored if you would subscribe, press like, and share it so we can find the strength to bring more moving stories to you each day. We would truly love to hear how you feel after walking with Olivia and Dominic to this point. Have you ever met someone who saw your scars and stayed anyway? Do you believe love can grow out of the hardest, harshest circumstances? Please leave a comment. Share with us what is in your heart. Every word you write matters, and every story you share is something we treasure. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. We wish you good health, a life filled with small joys, peace, and everyday happiness. Remember, no matter how hard things get, you are not alone. There is always someone waiting somewhere to love you. Until next time, take care of yourself.